He's so weird.
It's like that
You have to
video
be
where
like,
he like showed up on PewDiePie's channel because they were doing the whole meme review thing, and like they had him sit down and look at a bunch of pictures that were like Tesla memes and Elon Musk memes, and he didn't laugh at any of them until the very end, where they showed him a picture of a dead deer at the bottom of a pool that said, "I don't think my car is working," or something like that, and he just started dying.
yeah,
And it's like, why? The dead deer is the one that made him laugh.
yeah, yeah. He just makes dick jokes on Twitter all the time, which is really funny. He said, "If there's ever a scandal about me, please call it elongate." That was his take.
I like it.
Yeah,
Yeah. No, I think he's kind of a really interesting person, but
yeah. He's not like asshole CEO guy either.
mhm.
He's fundamentally he's an engineer.
And like
Um,
he kind of
who's
does
smarter than
run
all of the other
his
engineers.
yeah, he does kind of run his employees pretty ragged, but like they're actually doing like making progress.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. We might as well jump into this. So, welcome back to the Forever Milk podcast. And today we're going to be taking a look at the Light Years by Aviations. And if you don't know, this is a kind of a prog rock album from 2018. Not didn't get a whole lot of attention when it was released, and really still doesn't. This group just released a track called Outliers, which is a re-recording of a song off of their first album, which is finally getting them a little bit of attention. But this was a group that was formed in 2011 by a bunch of Berkeley students, um, and they've had, I think, 2 full LPs, and this is their second one that we're taking a look at today.
What does
So,
LP stand for? I've looked it
long
up about 2,000 times
long play
and can never
long play record,
stands for
essentially.
let's play.
Let's
Yeah,
let's play. So yeah, we're
that's
taking
what
a
I
look
know.
at the Light Years by Aviations today, um, and hopefully it will go pretty smoothly. I know that this is an album that I've been pretty familiar with. I stumbled across it. I think within a few months of its release, and pretty much fell in love with it on impact. Essentially, I think it's got a lot of really interesting stuff going on that will be fun to discuss. But I'll let Timmy say what he needs to say here.
Um, well, regrettably, we've already talked about this a little bit, but like, I basically just didn't like this at all. Like, not at all. I have to review this because these guys are like top tier talented. I have to review it um in terms of like cool things that are in the music rather than I don't want to give something a bad rating just because it's not my cup of tea,
Mm-hmm.
right? So um I was I, my ratings weren't just abysmal despite the fact that I didn't like it at all. So a couple complaints right off the bat, like, you know, the vocals I think are too low in the mix generally, and the whole mix is too quiet, and I don't think there's any dynamics in the mix. Um,
Hmm.
Singer has a really good voice. He's a really good singer. Really
Interesting that
tasteful
you
kind
think
of
that the
delivery.
interesting thing about the mix, because I was actually going to go out of my way to praise the mix on this album. Um,
I mean,
as-
it's a really, really neat, organized, well
mhm.
organized mix and just clean. But I am not a fan at all. Like,
I just I think that everything it's very clear. And
yeah,
I can see kind of what you say about like not having a ton of dynamics. But depending on the song, I think there's a few tracks on here that
I mean
the
the
way it swells
songs
and things.
do, but like the songs themselves do, but I don't think the mix really gives it as much oomph. Like,
Mhm.
especially for an album that's like kind of a prog metal ish album, you know,
Mhm.
it with really heavy riffs, and it really should have more punch to it, I think.
Mhm.
Um, but that's just my opinion. it's pretty like jazzy a lot of the way through, and uh, but it's like I'm just not a fan of the prog thing in
Hmm.
general. Like I said, I had to go through and take notes on what the cool things were, but it's kind of to me an album of cool things and just talented musicians playing like orchestrated pieces rather than like songs. And there's only like one or two songs that I would really go back and listen to,
Hmm.
and it was tough to get through also because every song was 7 minutes long, so you can't just listen to it in small. It's harder to listen to in like short uh, little sessions.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
so
that was something that I was kind of one of the reasons I was sort of hesitant to put this one on our review list, just because I know that a lot of people have a harder time listening to longer songs, as it requires a bit more
yeah,
of an attention span as far as like being able to, sit down and just listen to things and not really do a whole lot. Um,
I mean I can
for
listen to
another song.
longer
Well,
stuff,
I'm not saying you
but
can't. I'm just saying
yeah,
it is like the way people consume music a lot of the times aren't usually isn't like in a
right.
longer form. People want to sit down and listen for an extended period of time. And I think
Well, the
that
whole thing,
kind of goes to show with a lot of like the state of the music industry, why everything's kind of gone to short singles instead of like, you know, a whole album is not,
mhm,
albums aren't like the thing that they were, where people get an album to listen to the album. They'll go out and buy an individual song, or
mhm.
they'll just get a single. Or artists that there's some artists that I like that only really release singles anymore because albums are not really like the same, I don't have the same appeal as they used to for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
they'll come back. I mean, it's been back and forth, I think, for decades, but yeah, that's where we are at the moment, and it's not just the long song thing. It's just there's nothing really conventional about this album at all, and that's why
Oh
it's
yeah,
hard. And there's a
it's
reason
very
why,
out there, I think.
yeah, and there's a reason why like stuff like that there's going to be a bunch of reasons why any given album isn't popular, you know, and in this case, I think that's definitely one of them. It's not a digestible, like packageable single that you
Mhm.
can hand to somebody or put out on the radio, like
Yeah. No, absolutely.
stuff like that.
And like there's moments on this album that I feel like if they were like a little more smaller and broken off from the rest of a track, that it would make a good single. And
Yeah.
really the only song on this album that I think really had a whole lot of notoriety behind it, well, there were, I guess, two, but there's a track a little later on, which is actually, funny enough, it's the longest track on the album, Captain Nobeard. That was like the big song on this album. um, and is the one that kind of everyone, when they talk about this band up until recently with their some of their new releases that they put out last year, everyone was like, "This is the song from this band. It's crazy. Listen to all this crazy stuff." And that's kind of the thing, I think, with a lot of people. And this kind of music is people are listening for that like craziness. They want that like really some crazy technical drum beat that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, or
Mhm.
some really odd rhythm section with like a really wacky solo over top of it, or things
Yeah.
like that. But I disagree to some extent about this being hard to digest. I think as far as like a lot of prog music goes, this is one of the more like easily digestible albums that I've kind of run across. I
No,
will
I don't
say
think so. I think
I will say that it is very like there's a lot going on, and it can be hard if you're not accustomed to this style of music. It can be a lot to take in. But for me, I don't know. I always felt like this one was, it had just right amount of like crazy stuff going on, but everything still had like a sort of a tastiness to it. Everyone had a really strong like sense of either melody or flow. Um,
yeah, well, this is an interesting review because this is a smaller band and there's not much content about them, so there's like somewhat of a chance they could actually see this, at
yeah.
some point. And they're really engaged with people like in the comments of all their videos and everything. So, uh, I don't everything I say in this session, I don't mean I don't mean maliciously, and they're obviously again like any criticism is not going to be because of
Mhm.
like musical talent. Although I do think as songwriters, like their strong suit is we talk about this later, as like we get to specific
Mhm.
songs, but these songs are more they're not like songs. They're like orchestrated pieces of music to me,
Mhm.
because they're just
Yeah.
crazy.
I do think that is like a sense of perspective because I have always had a big like fascination with really really long songs and like being taken on this really big journey over the course of a track or two. Um, I
Hmm.
mean, it goes to say I'm a big Dream Theater fan, so this kind of stuff is right up my alley. Um, if you've listened to Dream Theater, you kind of know what I'm talking about. I don't know if I've ever shown you any Dream Theater stuff, but they're talk about hard to digest.
Yeah,
um, anyways,
yeah,
yeah, we can go ahead and get into
yeah.
this. I
Let's
will
get on with this.
say one more thing, because you commented about the singer. I do think the singer is really good, and I envy his sense of control, but I do think that he kind of lacks a sense of like draw to his voice. There's nothing really like specifically like you hear his voice and you're like, wow, that guy sounds crazy. But he does do what he does really well. Like he fits the role super well. But he does kind of have a very generic, I want to say, timbre to it. It's very normal sound.
He kind of reminded me of like Patrick Stump
Interesting.
a little bit, vaguely, very vaguely. He has that kind of where his like very open throated kind of delivery.
I believe his name
It
is
reminded me a lot.
Adam Benjamin. I think that's his name.
Adam something, I don't know,
Yeah.
but it reminded me a lot of Haley Williams' delivery on "This Circle" by Paramore for
Interesting.
people out
I
there.
haven't even thought about
The
that song yet.
way, well, uh, that was like after the album, the first album, I think, or during it. But her performance on that song was like above most of the other stuff because you could tell on the first album she was still really learning how to sing, and
Mhm.
but her delivery on "This Circle" it was very similar to a lot of the stuff I heard on here. And a lot of the melodies and guitar tones on that song were similar to this album, I think.
Hmm.
A lot of the stuff on here, but
Cool.
yeah, let's
Yeah,
get
let's
on with
go ahead and
this.
dive in
First track.
to our first track, Dizziness Explained.
Were you gonna go?
I was gonna let you go first. This is probably my least favorite song on this album. I don't think it doesn't have any moments for me that I'm like, wow, this is really. It doesn't come together in a way that I think some of the other tracks do. Um, it's got some really like good stuff going on. But this song for me, it's very much more of the same that's on the rest of the album, just not as um, I guess like not as clear minded about what's going
Mhm.
on with this track.
Um, yeah, I mean, the whole album was overall was very, very samey to me, and I wouldn't be
Hmm.
able to like pick
Yeah,
out most of them
they have a super
if you gave
consistent
it to me
soundtrack to track.
without a title. But like the some of the things I wrote, I had like I took notes on this one twice because I didn't really have enough notes the first time. Um, on this particular song. I don't think I did that for any of the other ones. But I said first 2.5 minutes are mostly just riffing, and I really don't care for it much. Um,
Hmm.
but the second time I said first part after the intro is pretty good. I liked it pretty well. And what one motif that was common throughout this whole album, I think, was whenever there was a guitar solo, it was really good,
Hmm.
and the lead tone is really good. It
I
was
was about to say
really
something about
aggressive.
that. I think that the lead tone in
Yeah.
this album is gorgeous, pretty much
Hmm.
front to back. Um, I know, yeah, this song's got a pretty heavy start, and I've listened to this track 30 or 40 times, and I can't super well recall a lot about it. Um, I think the bass tone is really sick on this track as well, which is pops up here and there throughout the album. I like the bass tone a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
For one of the middle sections, I just wrote, "What the fuck is going on?" Like they just go off into left field, and they're like, "What is this even like?" He starts screaming at some
yeah,
point, and
that there's like a weird like semi screamo section kind of in the first, I guess, half-ish of the song.
It was
Maybe.
like schizo and weird. It was just
Yeah,
like, you
and
know,
it's
they're
it's
all over the
followed
place.
by a really killer vocal line like immediately after, but like it starts and that whole like little section is very strange. Um, there's then it like has a really techie solo, which is cool, but I don't think it's one of the stronger solos on the album.
Hmm.
Um, and it does that really pretty break where I think a lot of the slower parts of this album have a lot of really and the melody and the sound kind of like comes to the surface a little bit more,
Yeah.
where a lot of the times it's buried under all the riffage. Um, and then there's like that build up section towards the end, and the drum fills in there are killer. Um, but as far as the song, like I said, as a whole goes, it just doesn't really click for me. I feel like none of the sections are definite enough for me to really latch onto.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure in the outro of this song, I can hear, I want to say it's the Majora's Mask, Dawn of the Final Day bell kind of
Mm.
happening in there.
I heard a fucking police siren in like
I
during the
forgot
last
about
part.
you.
I
I
was like,
forgot about
you cannot do that in a song because people listen to shit in their cars and they think like, you can't do
I
that.
think funny enough, I think the Stones had a song where they put like, and I could be getting the artist wrong, where they put like s- voices in the background to kind of make it sound like somebody's trying to kind of maybe talk to somebody who's listening to the headphones, so they'll think that somebody's talking to them, kind of mess with the listener. So it's kind of that thing, but that is actually funny you mentioned that. I've listened to this album in the car a lot, and I have been like, when that siren comes in, I've been like,
Yeah.
wait a minute. But
Yeah. I do like before going into the mellow part, the drum fill that happens. He just goes and then it just stops. I really like that.
yeah,
You know,
I forgot about that. That
it
part's
isn't
really
like
cool.
Georgia the Jungly, but it's like it was just a really cool tom
Hmm.
fill and transition like into that. Um, there's some decent riffing after the mellow part is over, like pretty good kind of stuff. But and then the police siren happens, and then the song is basically over. That's about all I have to say.
Yeah,
I gave it like a 5 or a 6.
interesting.
Um,
I actually expected that to be a lot lower. I'm actually sitting at a 6 out of 10 on this one as well.
yeah,
Um,
I don't think we're gonna agree too much after this.
yeah.
If this is like, I wouldn't even expecting like, you would have a song that you just be like, yeah, I don't know about,
Mhm,
because you really, really like this album,
mhm.
and so
I like this album a lot as like uh a listen through in one sitting kind of thing. And then there's like maybe 2 or 3 tracks I listen to on their own a lot. But for the most part, I don't listen to this one a lot unless I'm sitting through the whole album. Um,
yeah.
'Cause it feels like one big song because of how like consistent it is with its sound from start to finish. Um, but yeah, no, this one's it's okay. It's not like a blow me away kind of opener, and it's fine. But moving on to uh,
Geweest.
track number 2, Quest. I think this song is killer.
Bow your head. It reminded me of "Bang Your Head." Who does that one?
I don't know.
I
I
can't
know what song you're
remember.
talking about. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Maybe it's "Quiet Riot." I can't remember,
Um, yeah, no, this
but
is to me
that
like
was
one of
just
the
so
highlights.
corny to me. Like when
Really,
that came
I thought
out.
that that was a really really sick like intro line. The intensity that's present there doesn't show up very often
Well, I don't
anywhere
think
else.
he has like his voice doesn't fit that kind of thing very well. He
Yeah,
he just goes "Bow your head," you know.
I think
So
if it
like
had
he was trying to
happened,
sound like Corey Taylor or something. Like
mm,
the beginning of what's the psychosocial? He goes, "I did my time," but he
yeah,
sounds like "Bow your head,"
yeah, I don't know. I think that that's a really cool way for the vocals to come in on this track. If they had done it more often on this song, I think I would feel the same way. But because it's just that little intro section and it happens once and it's real intense, I was like, yes, I like that.
Yeah.
Um, but aside from that, I that intro riff on this track is just so freaking crunchy. And when it comes back in the second time or two, I just think it's. I think as far as like the heavy, heavy stuff on this album, this is the only point where I was like, I'm gonna start headbanging really heavy right now. Like this is the only time it gets me really really pumped.
A lot of the riffy stuff just really didn't work for me on this album. Um, some of it did, but most of it there was hardly anything on there like, "That's a nasty, sick fucking riff," you know?
Hmm.
Like, but so I didn't but it first starts to sound jazzy in the quieter section. This is the first time the album starts to
Hmm.
sound jazzy. I called it, like, nature jazz in the notes, where it kinda matched the album cover really well.
Yeah.
How corny is that? It's nature. We play nature jazz. Um,
Interesting. uh
but and then I wrote bad period ass period motherfucking period guitar solo.
yeah, this is my favorite guitar
So,
solo in the on the album. I think it's just phenomenal. I like that you wrote it out like that.
yeah. Yeah. That's
And
what
so
I was feeling. I was like, "Oh boy." Like, but again, when I'm listening to music for like where it's just looking for cool stuff, I have to really pay attention to like even for that I was like had to pay attention to
mhm,
figure out that I really liked that guitar solo. Which was another reason like the album was hard to get through because it was such an involved process, particularly when I was taking the
mhm.
notes on it. Um,
Yeah, I'm not gonna have us listen to a
but
whole bunch of stuff like this, just saying, like for the future.
yeah,
But I did
that's
want to
fine
just
with me.
test the waters with this one, and
Yeah.
um, yeah, no, I think the solo is sick, and then the drums kind of pop off as well during the solo section. He's just going off.
Mhm.
As far as
I
individual
think if I remember
instrumentation,
correctly, there was some really cool rhythm guitar stuff, just instrumental going on under or behind the guitar solo
yeah.
as well, if I remember correctly.
Um, I want to say that a lot of this song is kind of filled with game references. I haven't really done a whole lot of research on it, so I'm not entirely sure. Um, but that's
It's
kind of more
funny,
of a
like
besides the point thing.
we were talking about lyrics before this, and I didn't pay attention to a single lyric like throughout this entire process. Like I just don't know. I didn't pay attention at all. I don't know any of the songs are about, which is
Mhm.
kind of uncharacteristic. It's I don't know why. I think it's partly because the vocals will row in the mix, and partly because like
I, you know,
in orchestrated pieces like this, I'm not just caring about the lyrics as much. I don't know. I
mhm.
don't know why, but I just
Well,
wasn't.
the lyrics are not, I think, one of the strong suits on this record. Like they're fine and they fit really well, but they're kind of like choppy, where like the lines on the like they're not like full line. Sometimes it's just like a few words that kind of would be a full
Yeah, I
line.
don't think they're meant to be like the main focus of
Mm-mm.
this type of band either. Whatever
Mhm.
they're doing,
Um,
probably not.
but
Um,
uh, the harmonies on this track, I think this is the first time on the album where like harmony really starts to show up for the vocals, and I think it's absolutely beautiful. And they do gang vocals really well in this track as well. I feel like they're fairly harmonized gang vocals come in really cleanly. Um, but I also want to call attention um, the bass section in the outro where is kind of doing a I, I can't remember what it's called right now. Slap. It sounds like he's doing some slaps at the end,
yeah,
and it's that was killer. Um,
yeah,
I'm a big sucker for like funky crazy bass stuff like that. And it only
hmm
shows up fairly sparingly, but I thought that was really cool.
yeah.
Um, and
I
I
put
guess
the la-
you got
the last thing I put was ending is nice with the heavy, and I'm reading directly off of this because I don't remember what song sounds like. But ending is nice with heavy riff and the more melodic stuff happening in the background. And overall, I gave this one a 7. Felt
hmm,
pretty good.
yeah the ending riff is actually the same as the intro riff, or at least if I remember correctly, as I was listening to this earlier today.
Um,
Um, but maybe it just comes in a little bit better at the end for you. But I want to put this out there as well because this is kind of the first time where it really starts to show up on this record as well. Is the keys sort of give this kind of underlying feel of like a sense of almost like innocent, childhood imagination underneath all of this really heaviness the key tones that they use on this album that I think kind of adds
Mhm.
to why I appreciate the sound here. Because I don't get that
It's a
feeling a lot from
ketogenic
music.
song. You said ketones because yeah, like, but
Yeah, yeah, got it. So, um,
we can
yeah,
we can edit that out.
but I'm gonna give this one. I'm gonna give this track an 8. Personally, I think it's really strong point for the
Well,
record.
I'll write it in. Uh, Concrete and Kitten.
Concrete Kitten. This was, I think, the other like fairly popular song off of this album.
Uh, I put like it was a really nice segue into the intro, like how they went into the intro section and nice guitar tone in the first section. I kind of liked it, which is funny because like they did sort of similar guitar tones in other songs, and I didn't like it as much.
Mhm.
Like, so I don't know, but
Probably just context.
um, melodically, again, going back to this circle, like the guitar tone, this is where it sounds really similar, I think, to this circle. The guitar tone does, and just the overall vibe, but not
Hmm.
melodically. Or rhythmically, it sounds really similar to this circle, that first part. Um, by the way, I really recommend that song to people. That's a great song, and it's like it wasn't on an album, so it's not a popular song from them, but it's a great song, Paramore. So, um, okay, the part where I listened to this one today because I needed more notes on it. So it's a little fresher. The part where they go back and forth within like a second. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah,
Like, the guitars, but they're totally hard panned on either side,
yeah.
and so it's just like, you know,
Yeah.
kind of thing. That was pretty interesting, and, like, piano lead when it comes in, it's really cool.
Hmm.
Um, and the whole song gets a bit jazzier when the piano comes in, um, which is okay, you know, it's just like, that is what it is. It's not my cup of tea, but you know, I apparently I felt the need to comment on it, so, you know, that's something. Nice guitar solo again on this one. Um,
I feel
a
like I'm
lo
gonna be
th
saying that. I
this
feel like we're
one
gonna be saying nice guitar solo on practically
yeah,
every
well,
track on this album.
yeah,
Because I think his
there
name
really
Sam
is, but,
Harchick.
like
He's a killer player.
mhm. There's lots of nice licks and guitar runs on this song, but, like, overall, this one was kinda not too melodically diverse.
Hmm.
It didn't seem to me. It was kinda doing basically the same thing the whole song.
Yeah, I think this one is like the most like through and through closest to just like a normal song that shows up on this album. It doesn't like variate too
Yeah,
much, and it's pretty straightforward. And but I think it works fairly well. I think like the lead tone on this track in particular is really pretty. Um, and again, that's kind of for the whole album, but um, the guitar break section is really sick. The mix on this one feels very full. Um, the vocal melody is great.
feels what?
It's very full. I felt that the mix on this
Oh,
track in particular was pretty full, but the vocal melody on this song is really good. I do wish it like mixed it up a little bit because it is pretty similar, like from start to finish. Um,
the vocal milady.
but yeah, the
I'm
keys
sorry.
when the keys come in for the like jazzy section is really pretty, and I think a lot of the sound of this album is kind of defined by those keys because they do have a sense of like this magic to them. And then I think in this instance, I think the guitar tone
It's
actually
a big
lends.
part of the
Yeah.
jazziness, particularly in the mellow parts, because you don't really hear it in the other
Hmm.
parts, you know, much. But um, yeah, it adds to the atmosphere pretty well when there is those kind of atmospheric
Hmm.
parts, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like they are not afraid to use it as like a lead instrument either. You know, it's very prominent for them.
Um,
So
yeah. Um, again, love the way the harmonies are layered into this one. I think it's really pretty, especially towards the ending. Um,
the
strings kind of.
harmonies on this album felt so pop punk to me, like super
You
like
know,
simple melodically
that's probably why I
vocal
like them.
harmonies.
As you know, I'm a
Yeah.
big sucker for pop punk. I didn't really get that feel, but I can kind of hear it now that I'm thinking about it.
I mean, I noticed it more, I think, on one of the later songs, but I think it's probably true for most of them, you
As
know?
I'm sitting here wearing a Story So Far T-shirt. Um,
Mhm.
That's
That's what it sounds like to me.
yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to say about this one. I think it's probably the most
Me
straightforward
neither.
on this album.
I gave it, like, a 5 or a 6.
Mm. I think it's pretty simple as far as this sound goes. It's about as simple as it gets. Um, and I think it's really straightforward. And I give it. I think it works really well, and I think I would give it an 8. I come back to
Mhm,
this one fairly often, not as often as some others on here. Like I come back to like Quest and like 2 or 3 others a little bit more, but I do like this one a lot.
mhm.
But yeah, moving on, we have Void.
Yep. This is, like, the one I would come back to.
This is my favorite song on the album.
Um,
Easily my favorite song on the album.
yeah. There's, like, an ominousness and urgency to the very beginning that
Yeah.
goes on for a while. The song, most of it could be movie score, I think. And then there's, like, kind of a grungy rhythm guitar tone, like 90s, because it's, like, neck pickup with, like, a lot of chorus on it.
Mm-hmm.
So it really sounded grungy a lot of times, and, um, they changed I don't remember a lot of the specifics, but, like, they changed the key at one point, and it's, like, interesting. That's what I said. Oh, it reminded me of the bridge. This is I've been talking about this EP all week, but, it reminded me of the bridge of Iron Rooster. Um,
I would have to go back and
off
listen
Foo
to Iron
Fighters.
Rooster. I haven't heard in a
Uh,
minute.
yeah, that's off Saint Cecilia,
Mm-hmm.
Foo Fighters EP, but, it reminded me of the bridge of that song, and I've kind of been digging that song in the last day or so more, but that was a little bit jazzy too, but the piano section, like,
Dude.
in the later part of the song was, like it was, like, Charlie Brown-ish to me, you
Yeah.
know, like, the jazzy piano stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it was, like, moody Charlie
Yeah.
Brown stuff, moodier than that. Or, like, Why We Ever for Pedals for Armor. It
Interesting.
reminded me of that a little bit, which I really like. I like they do, like, octave chords on the piano, which sounded really good. Um, I think the way they did, like, the chatting in the background at the end of the song was, like it was I think it should have been more background and lower in the mix,
Yeah.
because rather than, like, and maybe that's just because it's what I'm used to when people do that sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
but, like, I think rather than the song is going down and the chatting is coming up, like,
I think that
it
was
would've
mostly
been
used
better.
as a segue into the next song as well.
No, I know, but I
Um,
think it would've been better to, like,
no, yeah,
have,
yeah, yeah.
an actual ending to the song, like, um but I could not be remembering it exactly right, but that was just my initial take on it, but
Mm-hmm.
this was, like again, it's, like, the one I would go back to, I dug it pretty well. I think this is what they're better with, like, on one of the later songs I said this, I think on one of the instrumentals,
I think I know which song you're
it
talking about,
it was
'cause that's my
Lullaby,
yeah, I love Lullaby. That's another really
and
cool track.
I think they're better rather than trying to make, like, songs that most people make, they're better off making pieces that are like landscape pieces and atmospheric pieces like this. That's just again, this is it's like movie score.
Mhm.
And so I think this is really where their strong suit is. Um, rather than like the more like proggy metally stuff.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
That feels like
I
really dickish to say, like, like stick I hate to hear like anybody say that about musicians that I like and, if they ever see this, how to like I feel bad for saying that, but like,
Kick the puppy, Timmy.
like stick to like this
Kick the puppy.
exactly what you've been
Kick the
doing. I
puppy.
don't think you're very good at it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's just a matter of taste.
Not that they're not very good at it, but yeah, it is just a matter of taste.
I
But
mean, I
that's
do
what I
agree
think they
though.
do
Like,
better.
I think that this is easily the strongest track on this album, just like from front to start. front to start, front to back, start to finish. Help.
Up to bottom.
Yeah, it's cool to hear an instrumental. I think that it's got that super dark, vibey feel in the intro, and it's just kind of like,
You don't even notice that it's an instrumental.
yeah, it's the
Like,
atmosphere just freaking massive and you just super like eerie.
it's almost like a pre-battle, pre-war song. Like,
Hmm.
it's the thing I'm looking for, like a fantasy kind of vibe. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know.
for me, this song is like exactly what I look for if I'm listening to something at night when I'm driving around. Like this is super
Yeah.
dark, super vibey, kind of like it's got a bunch of space, and very eerie. The bass line in the intro section is just freaking sick, and super like driving. Not as in like driving around, but like a lot of energy
Yeah,
in a
yeah, I
sense,
know what
but
you
without being really heavy. And of course, right when they go into the key change, the keys come in, and keys bring the magic as they do at that sense
mean.
of magic that this album has. But yeah, I think really where it comes to for this song being what I like so much about it is the kind of piano section in the outro. It's the somberness of it, and like it does kind of have that Charlie Brownie feel, but it's absolutely like dripping with this like sense of nostalgia and like sentimentality. And I don't know, it's kind of a really really nice resolution to like this building atmosphere that kind of comes up through this song. It's very warm as well.
Mhm.
Um, but
Yeah, well, that's what I kind of mean, like with why we ever had its upbeat part and like, but then it had the much more mellow kind of fade out, and it wasn't too upbeat of a song in the first place, but yeah, you get what I mean.
hmm
Like, but I gave this song a 7. Maybe it would deserve an 8 if I listened
hmm
to it again. Like maybe I'd give it an 8, but I gave it a 7.
yeah, this
Um,
song for me
that's
is a pretty straight up 9. I listen to this track all the time, and I think it's just
yeah,
a really clean mix of stuff. But
yeah,
yeah, moving on to the next one. I have a feeling we're probably going to disagree pretty heavily on this next track. Um,
no, probably
this is Captain Nobeard. This is the song that
Captain
got me into
No.
this band. This is the one I first stumbled into them with, and I was just kind of like,
Kind of a funny
"Whoa!"
title.
Yeah, I'm really not sure what it's in reference to. I'd like to kind of know about that.
I think they were just being because, like, Captain Blackbeard was like a famous pirate. Maybe
Yeah,
that's. I think it's just a play on that. Captain No Beard. Wouldn't that be funny? A guy who was famous for not having
Mhm.
a beard, but
Yeah,
oh,
this track's a
you
whopper.
might not. I said beginning drum beat sounds really poppy, like "Waiting on the World to Change" or "Imagine Dragons" or something like that.
Yeah,
The very very beginning. I
yeah,
mean,
no, I don't hear that really at all. Kind of gives me
because it
more
has
of
like
like a kind
that, that,
kind of
like
gives me
that kind
more
of
of like
rhythm.
a marching band type feel to like the drum beat at the intro.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't know.
but I don't know. Yeah, I don't hear that really at all. Um, but fair enough, I guess. Just how like you think my granddad looks like Bill Clinton, and I don't.
Yeah, if you ever want to find his granddad, just look for the guy who looks like Bill Clinton, and you'll be fine. Like you'll find him. That's how you will know. A guy who always also wears red, white, and blue as well, so he even looks
He
even
does.
more like a
He
president.
does do that. He
Yeah,
does do that.
yeah, but yeah, the more I've seen him, I was like, don't. He doesn't look very much like Bill Clinton. I can still see it, but not really as much as I
Yeah,
used to.
I bet if you told him that, he would be offended. He is very right
He
wing.
doesn't like the Billy
He's
Clit.
pretty much exclusively right wing is good, left is evil kind of guy. But we'll
I
not get
kind of
in.
got the vibe that he was a right winger, but
Yeah, let's not get into
whatever.
politics on here.
Yeah.
This is about the music.
What are your
And
political
I know I brought
opinions
it up, but let's.
on?
I hate
Yeah,
children. That's my political opinion. Kidding.
yeah, that just reminds me of Mr. Howard from iCarly. He says that I hate children.
My God, I forgot about that guy. Do you hear they're doing a reboot?
Yeah, and I also heard that thank God Sam isn't coming back. Jeanette McCurdy. I don't think. That could be wrong.
No,
But
she
I don't
like
think anybody should come back because that dude, Dan Schneider, like
I don't think Dan
it's all
Schneider's gonna be
speculation.
involved anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but no, the reason
I've been
Sam's
binging
not
that show
coming
because it
back.
got on Netflix again, and it's like this show is so fucking bad. Like,
Yeah, I think that the shining character of that show is Spencer. I think just I like Jerry Trainer as a whole. I think he's a great dude and a great
oh
actor.
yeah, I like Freddy a good bit too.
hmm Nathan Kress is a good.
But yeah,
He was
he's
in
really good.
a web series I liked a lot a few years back. But
Yeah,
this is we're talking about an album. I
yeah.
can't.
Captain Nobeard.
Yeah,
Captain Nobeard.
this song's a whopper. 8 minutes essentially.
I
It's
think it's a Big
7.
Mac.
Well, I like Big Macs better, so maybe I should have said this song is Big Mac.
I've never had either of them. Big Big Whopper and the Mac.
You're not missing a whole lot. Don't kill me. I swear.
I wouldn't think that I
Fast food's
would
nasty.
be.
I eat
Actually.
it all the time. I know.
Yeah,
I'm
a
a bit of a
McDouble man
masochist.
myself.
I'm a masochist when it comes to fast food, but I'll eat it. I'll get down
Just
with some
skip
Big
the
Macs.
French fries, and fast food is so much better. I think.
Dude, McDonald's fries are where it's at.
I mean, as far as like the unhealthiness, it improves a lot if you don't have the French fries. That's what I
fair.
think because I never feel bad after just eating the McDoubles.
That's fair.
But if I eat the fries, it's like bleh, like bomb in my stomach. But
yeah.
what? Okay, say something about
Captain
this
Nobeard.
song.
Yeah. So this song is a whopper. I have a lot to say about it because there's a lot that happens in this song because it's real long. They come in full guns blazing in the intro after the little drum part. Again, the tones on the guitar in this track are beautiful. The harmony that they use throughout this track is great. This one is like they took their prog meter and turned it from like an 8 to a 24, an 8 out of 10 to a
Yeah.
24 out of 10. So they're just flying off the rails for this track. Vocal line in the slow part I think is really pretty. Killer bass grooves throughout the whole thing, great bass tone. I'm going to try to run through everything I have to say about this one as quick as I can because this is a long one and I could talk about it for quite some time.
I'm probably gonna edit most of that stuff out. So
go ahead.
unless you want to keep our fast food discussions in, like I don't know.
It might be fun. It's your call.
Yeah.
But the piano on this track really does its job well. The magic is in full swing. The magic feel that I've been talking about the whole time. It's during the final like build up and like last section of the song. I feel like that magic is just in full swing. It's all coming in. The solo in this one is phenomenal. It's super tasty, and I think the gang vocals at the end of this one are. I'm pretty hesitant to say I'm okay with like whoa whoa whoas, and I feel like they do it pretty well enough here. So if there's a drawback, that's that one. Funny enough, I think this is probably the least accessible track on this album because of its length.
I didn't love it
because there's no like sections that are super concise and easy to latch onto. Albeit, I say this is one of my favorites on this album, and it's the song that got me into them. But the reason I think I like it, and the reason I think it could be kind of hard to latch onto as well, is because it feels like sort of a flex song. Sort of like they're showing off with this one, like this is all the crazy stuff we can do. Let's put it all into one song. I think it's still got a really like tasty feel to it.
Inherently showy.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thing about the music. I mean, even if you're not trying to be showy, you kind of are. Like if you're making prog music, but that's just that as it is what it is. I didn't say anything about the first, like other than what I already said. Like I said, the next thing I commented on was like 3.5 minutes in. I said the finger picking sounded really cool. Like at that point,
that section is nice.
And I liked after like about 6 minutes in, I'm skipping 3-minute intervals. I like when the drums kick in after the mellow part, the instrumental section. I like when the drums kick back in. He did something like pretty straight ahead, and it just hit just right and punched really hard. I really liked it.
Quick shout out to the drummer because I've mentioned like all the band names at this point. His name's James Norrell. I think I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know. It's a weird last name, but this dude I think is like the backbone of this group. Like it was him and the guitarist that initially like started the thing up, but like I feel like he's kind of the a centerpiece here where like everything's built around his playing because he's a kind of a beast of a player.
Yeah.
Um, but
Um, he he sounds like a really hard hitter. Like, it sounds to me like he which works well here, and the drums sound themselves sound really good, and, specifically in that one fill that I'm talking about. I think people, if they know the album, they know what I'm talking about, but, um,
I think this
like,
is going to
yeah,
be
that
one of
was a
those
good one.
albums that if anyone clicks on this video, they probably already know the album.
Yeah, probably. Unless they just know us and they're just being nice. They're like, "Sure, I'll listen to your podcast. It'll be awesome." But, um, this is where I noticed, that the guitar solos and the really cool lead tones, like, that's, like, on this whole album. That's when I noticed that it was kind of a consistent thing on this song, but, um, overall, like, I didn't have too much to say about
hmm
this one, like, other than what I've already said, so I gave it a 6. It was just not that interesting to me.
It's fair. Like I said, I do agree. I think this one is there's just a lot happening in this track, and it can be kind of hard to grasp. For me personally, I have this one sitting at a 9, um, and this kind of plays into my like love of really long and unconventionally like structured songs. Or I listen to this track all the time. It's one of my favorites, easily. So this one's kind of up there for me with Void as far as like how much I like it and how often I listen to it. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot else to really say about it, because I don't know a lot of music theory, and it would be hard for me to say a lot about this track without knowing. I feel like knowing the music theory, but I think it's really on point. It's a lot going on, and I really appreciate it. But we can
Yeah.
move on to 2 days.
This one felt like a little bit of a shift in tone, um, because it was simpler and less schizophrenic and all over the place and chaotic and, um, not as heavy. This is the one where I was like, it's kinda similar guitar tone to, like, the what I was talking about, "The Circle" earlier on whatever song, but I wasn't a huge fan of it in this context. I
hmm
think maybe I was just getting tired of the album and, like, the sound,
hmm
you know, and I've already talked about how it was hard to get through for me, but, like, I don't know, it just didn't work, but again, like, great solo and lead tone, but this one, like, I thought was, just generally a low point on the album. Um,
Yeah, it's not like a track that I really get into. I think that funny enough, they released a fully acoustic version, um, a little fairly recently of this track, and I think that I enjoy that version a whole lot more. I think it kind of fits the feel and the tone that this song was going for a whole lot better to not have any of the heaviness and like just kind of be somber the whole way through. Um, because I feel like at this point in the album, the sound that they have has kind of worn itself out a little bit. Like it had a lot of really high points, but something really needs to be different for it to really, really like grab me again. Um, and so give excluding one other track going forward, this it's kind of like the latter half is I think the weaker half of the album. Is this one
yeah.
doesn't grab me at all either. I think the acoustic in the intro is really nice. There's sort of like a sentimental, sadness in this track that I do kind of appreciate because I don't think that the sad feel is really present here anywhere else on this album. It kind of feels like I'm reminiscing on better times, but with like a hint of bitterness. Um, Really emotional solo. I feel like on this track, I liked it.
Mhm.
Um, this is the only track on the album where I feel like the lyrics ever struck me. Funny enough, um,
Yeah.
because
The vocals themselves, I wrote they go hard at one point, in the
yeah,
song, you know
yeah,
what I'm talking
that's
about?
what I have the same thing written. Like I think this was the best vocal performance on the album was on this
Yeah.
track. Big gang
I
vocals are nice here.
Yeah, and I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I really, really like the guy's voice, and I think he's a killer singer,
hmm
and that's, you know, it's I think it is more tasteful, um, than a lot of the other. most of the other things that are happening on this album. Like, you could put him in a lot of different bands because he's really good and his
Hmm.
voice just is very pleasing to
Yeah.
listen to, easy to hear. But
There's no like
I really
crazy
like it.
like weird ticks going on with his voice either. It's very like
Right. It's not
he's
like
like a
quirky and like, Tom York or kind of thing, although people love Radiohead, so that's it. But
I love
but
Radiohead.
I think the dynamics like don't on the same as the rest of the album. I don't think they hit very hard on this on this song. Um, like same as anything else, and I think it's partly due to the mix and partly due to the songwriting because like it doesn't when you have pieces like this rather than just the typical song structure that most people are used to. That it's like roughly the same throughout most things. Um, I don't think it's the same when it's just something totally out there like this, like the dynamics, in my opinion. Like, but maybe I don't know. I'm not sure
Uh,
exactly what I was referring to because I don't remember this song very well either. But I do remember like melodically, it was like the same thing throughout literally the entire
yeah,
6 or 7
it
minutes of
doesn't
it. So,
evolve a whole lot over the course of the track. Um, I like I said, this is the only time on the album where I feel like the vocals are really the centerpiece of what's going on.
mhm.
Um, and like there's a section where he sings, "I don't want to know who will come and go. The feeling has died." Um, Something about the delivery of that line has always really struck me. It feels very honest. Um, but and then it has another piano outro, really beautiful. I think it matches the tone of the track really well. But aside from that, I don't have a whole lot else to say about this one, and it kind of just sits at about a 7 for me.
I gave it like a 4 or 5, 4 to
Yeah,
5 rating.
I
So,
can't bring myself to give anything just for like the display of musicianship that's present on song to song. I kind of can't give myself a good enough reason for personally to be able to put it anything any lower than at like minimum of 5. And I don't even know if I
see,
gave anything a 5.
I think it's like to me for my personal like standards of what is like a good songwriter. I think part of that is making something that's um like easy to listen to and like like Dave Grohl has talked about this a little bit in interviews. Like you don't want to be, and they've completely abandoned this philosophy by now. But you know, you don't want to be a band that like challenges your audience.
Hmm.
I, to be fair, that's in the context of a band that know it doesn't necessarily apply
Hmm.
here because this band is not presumably doing anything different from what they've always done. But like, um, as far like talking about songwriting, I think part of the talent is making things that like people like can listen to. I don't know if I don't want to say easily, but like um, you kind of extend your hand to them a little bit,
Hmm.
like. Uh, but
I
that might not apply to this album. Like this particular song, I think they because it is kind of the same melodically throughout. That's why I comment on the songwriting because it just wasn't as strong in this
mhm.
on this song. That's what I think.
Yeah, that's fair. Um, yeah, and I think that's kind of contextual as well as like what kind of genre or audience you're trying to appeal to as well. It's like for example,
Yeah.
if the Foo Fighters ever tried to do something like this, I can't see it going even remotely well. And that's not like any kind of insult to their musicianship
Well,
or
you
anything.
wouldn't want to hear that is the point,
Yeah.
from them.
Um, and like without getting into any of that, like I think it's just trying to achieve different things, and these guys within this sound and this kind of like genre, I think that this is actually a little bit more um, less an album that's a little less out there than a lot of other stuff that
Yeah.
kind of shows up. But um, that just kind of comes with the territory, I suppose, as far as
Yeah.
prog.
Well,
And that's
it's
the reason
funny
it's not like
because
one of those
like,
genres that has like got a mass appeal. Um,
yeah. Well, it's funny though because like uh, you talk about this being like more accessible or digestible. I think it's like compared to the other stuff, like I would much prefer like Dance Gavin Dance or
Dance
Knuckle
Gavin
Puck
Dance is
or I guess you call
not
them
a
Knuckle
prog
Puck.
band.
You don't think so?
No, that be very squarely
I think they're
post-hardcore.
totally prog.
Um,
Yeah, but they're technically like as far as music theory goes, they're doing things and rhythmically they're doing things that no other post-hardcore band is doing.
well, I mean that's why
Like
people call them like have basically given them like their own subgenre, and they call it swancore because of Will Swan. But um,
mhm.
and it's kind of actually like been accepted pretty widely as like being its own little subgenre. But yeah, no, I wouldn't even compare this group to Dance Gavin Dance, aside from the fact that they're both groups that do really technically complex and interesting things because their
Mhm.
sounds are so like different. You know, Dance Gavin Dance sounds completely left field
Dance
and
Gavin Dance to me is
bogus.
more interesting because they have more emotional intensity and they have like to me much more digestible melodies.
Hmm.
And much like just
Well, I will
I like
say
them better.
about the digestible melodies thing, a lot of that comes from Tillian being
Yeah.
a bit of a pop diva.
Yeah.
Because if you ever listen to his solo work, he straight up he like has that pop star energy to him, and that's not an insult because I think he's
Kind of thing. Like
great at what he does. Um, but yeah, it's interesting because I think if I'm correct, the way the songwriting generally goes with this group is it's the drummer and the guitarist do everything initially, and then all the other stuff comes in afterwards. Um, and I guess
mhm.
like part of that is as well comes with why this is so wacky and out there is like it comes with that freedom of them being a very small band, so they can kind of just they're not worried about appealing to a certain audience and they're just making what they want to make, and there's like a sense
Yeah,
of freedom there, that you can kind of hear in the music.
absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah, like I said, I think it
Did
just
I
kind of
say my rating for this one? I gave it like a 4 or a 5.
yeah, you did. Moving
Um,
on, we have Face Waves.
whatever the fuck that means.
This is another
I have no idea what that.
low point for me on this album.
Yeah.
I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. It's kind of like this one's kind of up there with Dizziness Explained, where like it's fine. It's just one of those tracks where I feel like there's not a whole lot of clarity in what is being presented, and it just kind of blends into the rest of the album. Um,
Um, I didn't really like it, like the beginning part until the vocals came in with more power.
Interesting. I thought
I like the
the bass
riff.
line in the intro was super cool.
Hmm. I like. I'm just reading what I wrote here now. Like I like the riff where the snare is on all 4 beats afterwards. I don't remember, but
Hmm.
the song turns into speed metal briefly. I sort of remember that, which would probably be more appealing to me as a whole than most of this album. Even though I was kind of tired on this day, um, so I got a little bit snippy on this one. Uh, like speed metal, doing that would probably be more appealing to me as a whole than most of this album. Even though I don't listen to speed metal, but
Hmm.
um, I do remember like the lyric is paying attention so challenging, and then I said yes, this is such a chore. Serious lack of dynamics in the mix, and that was like I've already talked about that,
Hmm.
um but I do like that section. I guess it was after the speed metal section. um I should have been more specific. I just said this section. Like, what the fuck? Do future me a favor. But um again, good guitar solo with more coherent melody slash progression behind it. I really liked that
Hmm.
one, and some really interesting stuff going on behind that one. So um, the precision of the double kick on this song, as always,
Hmm.
like dude's kind of a madman as far as that goes.
Yeah, he's sort of a freak, in the best way for me at least. I let's see. Yeah, what do I say about this one? I think some of the harmony is great, and I think that's Probably getting old hearing me say that. I think that's kind of just a running thing for this album for me. Is I think the vocal harmonies are nice. I think there's a really cool breakdown section. It gets really djenty for a little bit later on. Um, there's some nice acoustic stuff that
Could that be the
happens.
speed metal section?
Uh, Maybe. I don't know. Um, I don't know if you have like a perspective on what djent usually would sound like, so I'd have to play some djent for you and see if
I
that's what you
know
think.
what basically it is. Like
Yeah.
if you're on YouTube, you've heard of Gent because of I'm not going to say his name, but everybody knows like the
um,
long dead meme of like whatever.
Gent gods. And then
Yeah,
there's some like gang shouts that happen on this track that like really it just kind of like doesn't work for me. It's kind of like oddly placed. But and the solo's nice. But aside from that, this is like I said, kind of a lower point. But the musicianship is still there for me to be able to appreciate the track. So I sit it at a 6.
I gave it like a 5 or a 6.
Cool.
Although I think for your 5 or a 6 is very different from my 5 of the 6 in the context of this album.
Hmm.
So, but it is what it is. So, Lullaby, I really liked.
This
This
track's
was
really cool. The other instrumental
this is
track for me.
where yeah, this is where I came to the realization when I was talking about earlier that I said they're probably better off doing these sort of moody pieces, than trying to make like real songs because, you know, if it's so like out there, like if you're going to do something out there, I think this worked better for them than like, making a song because most people, when they hear a song and I mean, I'm sure they know that they're probably, they're not going to be like top 40 band and they're probably okay with that.
Hmm.
Because just style of music, you know, might have been, when you were Rush in the 70s or 80s, like, you could get away with that. Like, but I think prog is very different now than it was
Hmm.
then. And they were doing
Even
a much more prog rock
yeah,
thing.
even in the 90s there was a lot bigger of a scene, and early 2000s like for the prog, and that was kind of when like Dream Theater was doing their um, like going really heavily into the scene, and everyone was really into Dream Theater. But it's kind of the whole prog thing is not where it used to be as far as like having a huge
Mhm.
audience. So
All
um,
right. Top 40 stuff is for the past 10 years it's just been like pop music
it
like
just and
and
it gets progressively
even
simpler as time is going
yes.
forward.
And even the stuff on like the rock charts are like pop music.
Oh
You
yeah,
have like
absolutely.
21 Pilots and Imagine Dragons and Portugal or something,
Portugal the
whatever the name of the band
Man,
is. Like,
not a
yeah,
rock
um,
band.
yeah, none of them are. They're just grasping at straws. But I don't know. Like that's you go on with that for quite a while.
Yeah.
But I liked this one. It had a neato bass lick in it. I
I'm
just had to
sure
point that out.
you're thinking. I'm sure we're thinking of the exact like the little bass solo that comes
Yeah.
in, and it's really like
Uh,
high tone and it's really pretty.
um, yeah. Um, but the song was more landscapey, very wintry or autumny, I thought.
Hmm.
And I like it's kind of ominous, like oh shit, when the palm mutes kind of come up and they swell a little bit, the guitars. But this is partly a criticism and partly not. Like um, it it's this song sounds like vlog transition music, just vlog music. Like you would put it over some really like atmospheric shots or transition
Oh,
shots,
okay. Like
you
like
know,
like looking at a mountain or.
stuff like that. Or maybe it's of the person itself. Like, but
Hmm.
it would work really well for like a traveling kind of thing.
Hmm.
If there were a music video for it, I think that would be a pretty good way to go. Um, like traveling at night and like again, it's like wintry or autumny. Um, but yeah, that's about it. I gave this one a 7.
Um, yeah, I think the keys in this track are really cool. Again, like the bass solo is just like I gives me chills. Usually when I hear it, I think it's incredible. I think that the drum work on this track is really, really subtle, but it's really sick. Um, 'Cause it's very like quiet and like reserved. But the big thing for me with this song is it has this. and like I've mentioned it a few times previously, but this song kind of, it's like this sound is at its peak where it's like it's got this sense of like childhood, innocence almost. It's got this really strong sense of like nostalgia for kind of what you kind of lose as childhood fades, and I mean, and that's only accented by like the music box at the beginning and having a sample of Winnie the Pooh in there.
Yeah,
So
that was funny.
this song always really strikes a chord with me, and I get really emotional listening to it. So I have a really strong attachment to this one. Despite I don't
Winifred
think
the
it's like
Pooh.
the best song on the album, I think it's really good. But I don't have a whole lot else to say about it. I think that the
This is
mood,
like one of the ones I would come back to.
yeah, I come back to this one a lot.
I think Void was like the other one,
And
but
I
yeah,
think this one sits at about an 8 for me. Um, but yeah, so that's it. And now we're here at the
I
end.
could give it an 8. It might grow on me at some point, but for now it's a 7.
Mhm.
But we're moving on to Tornado.
Tornado. All right. This song is kind of a mixed bag for me. There's some aspects I really like, and some aspects I really don't care for in this track. So I think that the guitar lead, especially like that little section in the intro, is gorgeous, and I wish that was a bigger focus on this track than it actually is. Um, and I think this song in particular is a really good mix of kind of what works over the course of the album for these guys, but it also, in the same way that it is a good mix of that, it kind of blends into some of the other tracks without having any kind of really strong, unique moments. Good solo again. um,
Yeah,
the part right out, like when he says, I've since been in awe, and then it goes into like the kind of like breakdown section with like a really heavy layer of keys is really really cool. Um, the gang vocals are really nice when it kind of goes into that soft spot towards the closer, and it's just a really pretty clean guitar section, and there's like kind of gangs floating in the background. Um, I think it's a pretty decent closer for an album, but I don't think it's like something I would consider like, wow, that was a killer closing track.
yeah,
Um,
that's was kind of my thing
and
too.
a
Like,
gripe that they did again is they did that weird like shout gang vocals thing. There, it's just like kind of and it's just like a bunch of them, and it's weird, and it just kind of seems out of place and doesn't really work
mhm.
for the like I think the intensity that that's intended to have. Um,
This was it took me till this song to notice that the vocal harmonies were pop punky. I just realized on this song because I was listening to the last 2 songs and getting the real notes on it today, um, like Lullaby and Tornado. I went back for a couple things, but I listened to these last 2 tracks like and got the notes on them today. So that was, I guess, I was like for some reason noticed today, but like the intro was pretty cool and the xylophone stuff or whatever it was kind of cool. And then the song kicks in and it doesn't sound like the same stuff song
mhm.
as the intro at all. Like,
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying about how I feel like when it loses like whatever like feeling that that intro builds up just kind of disappears and
yeah,
dissipates
I
when the
think it
actual
was a
song kicks
bad
in.
move, like for them, like, and they've done that throughout the entire album, just the riffy, heavy prog metal thing. Like, you know, it, again, I've already talked about like the whole album generally is like pretty samey in my opinion, but the middle section is uh more melodically interesting than that part too, I think. And it sounds pop punkish, like just in general, but with more technical and faster playing. It sounded a little bit pop punky where it had that kind of punch and that the speed or sorry, the tempo and just I don't know, just generally it sounded a little bit pop punky to me. I like kind of towards the end or like third quarter of the song or whatever, where the beat is like the snares on the 1 and the 3 instead. The beat kind of flips around.
Hmm.
It was a really good groove, and it's not the drummer just has great feel like when he was doing things like that, and um, sounding like he was a hard hitter too. As always. But but yeah, like you said, I didn't think it was like a great closer because it was you could have put it at just about any position in the album, but it worked. It
Yeah.
served that purpose. But I gave this song a 6. That's about all I've got to
Yeah,
say.
I gave this one a 7, just because
That's
I
all
feel
I
like
had to say
it's
about that.
pretty neutral. Um, um, but you know, it is what it is. I think it was a decent closer, but yeah. So, any final thoughts about this album, um, overall?
Overall, I gave the album a 5 just because just wasn't my cup of tea at all. But you can't really shit on them for not being talented. So, you know,
Yeah. For me, this is probably my favorite like prog album. I listen to it pretty regularly. They have some other stuff that's really good as well, but I tend to come back to this one a little bit more just because of like the like kind of childhoody nostalgia feel that I talk about, because I don't hear that a lot in music, at least in this kind of way where it kind of captures a certain mood. Um, but yeah, this is
yeah,
a really unique album, I think. As a whole, as far as like
yeah.
diversity, there's not a lot of it in there, but I like it a lot, and I think it's got a lot of really strong stuff going on, and I personally have it sitting at an 8.
Yeah, well, I'll say, like, as we're wrapping up, one of my biggest gripes, again, as I've already said, like, the mix really could hit harder and the dynamics as well.
Hmm.
You know, that's probably one of my biggest complaints. But it just wasn't my style, like, overall. And we talked about it a little bit. Is because like you know it takes more than just wow, that person is amazingly talented to like kind of compel me
Hmm.
musically. Like I can obviously recognize and respect like goddamn, and like I'll never be even a quarter as good as these guys, but um like just not again my cup of tea.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think sometimes with, especially with stuff like this, a lot of it comes down to how people consume music, and the way you like listen to things is very different than how I listen to things, I think. And I think it's just like the way that we process um music is different as well, because it's for me it's like a very quick thing where I'm like, okay, I like this and I like this, I don't want to hear this again, but I do want to hear this again. um
And I think for me, it's rather just my feelings change a lot about things,
mhm,
you know, and you pay attention to more details, um, like when you're listening, and I pay attention to like big picture most of the time.
mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I mean, I could literally give you a ton of examples where I'll like have a bunch of songs that I really like, but I only like them because of one little aspect. Um,
yeah,
so, but yeah, thanks for tuning in. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before we close this out?
not really.
Cool. I don't think we've
Maybe
decided
one day
on.
we will all have a glass of milk together.
Yes.
It's on me. The milk is on me,
Yeah, when we get
boys.
big, we're gonna have milk conventions.
If you do not bring milk, you are fired.
All right. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. Of course, we're always
Next
wanting
week,
requests for records to listen to,
yeah,
because so far we've just kind of been going back and forth choosing stuff. So if you guys have anything you want us to listen to, we'd absolutely love to take any kind of requests that you have. And what are we listening to next week? Because I don't think you've told me yet.
yeah, we talked about it was
Oh, did
Enema
we?
of the State.
Oh yeah, we're
Yeah,
doing Enema. Yeah, we're both really
Enema of the
familiar.
State in Britain.
We're both very familiar with Blink, so this should be very interesting. Um,
Yep, should
Alrighty,
be interesting.
drinking milk.
Bye.